Good evening. For those I haven't had the opportunity to meet, my name is Nancy Liu, and I have the honor of serving as the Secretary of the Sv2 Board. On behalf of our entire board and team, I want to welcome you here tonight. The purpose of this evening is to gather and connect as a community, hear an update on Sv2, and meet some of our newest grantees. Sv2 is a community of more than 200 individuals and families who have joined together to learn about effective giving and pool their resources to invest in innovative nonprofits and social enterprises. Our mission is to unleash the talents and resources of the Bay Area community to achieve meaningful social impact. This spring, we welcomed a fantastic new CEO, Linda Laser, who truly lives that mission. Before I introduce Linda, though, I want to first thank our former executive director, Jen Rattay, for her nearly 5 years at the Sv2 helm, building the momentum that drives Sv2 today. I also want to thank Jody Chiang for her tremendous leadership as the interim executive director during our transition. We are deeply grateful for the entire Sv2 team for the hard work during those busy months. I had the pleasure of serving on the CEO search committee alongside Laura Arriaga Andreessen, Archie Chandna, Alexa Colwell, Kelly Pope, and Tony Stainer under the fearless leadership of our board chair, Bill Brownell. We met with an impressive pool of candidates, but we were particularly thrilled when we found our ideal leader right within the Sv2 family. Linda Laser is well known to many of you, having served as a grant round leader, a lead partner, and a fellow board member. Linda brings deep experience in both the nonprofit and corporate sectors. Her most recent role as Chief of Staff at Partners in School Innovation, a national nonprofit in education, as well as a former Sv2 grantee. Her other roles in the nonprofit world includes being on the Citizen Schools California Advisory Board and on-the-ground work with low-income communities in Silicon Valley. Her corporate experiences include executive roles in marketing, strategy, and operations at Cisco, HP, and PeopleSoft. Without further ado, I want to bring to stage Sv2's new CEO, Linda Laser.
I'm really excited to see you all here tonight. And before I dive in, I'm just going to do a brief overview of the program tonight. As you know, after my brief remarks, we are going to be celebrating our newest recipient of our Laura Arriaga Andreessen Social Impact Award. And following that, we're going to hear from two amazing grantees, Somos Nuclear and Youth Law Center. And then you'll have plenty of time afterwards to be able to continue your conversations over dessert. I was really excited when I found out what the theme for this evening was, because as Nancy mentioned, I started my own giving journey through volunteering in low-income communities. And I was so impressed with the resilience that I saw with children, with families, with individuals who faced just incredibly tough circumstances and yet were able to overcome those. One of the favorite poems that I like to share on resilience is from Tupac, and it goes like this. Did you hear about the rose that grew from a crack in concrete? Proving nature's laws wrong, it learned to walk without having feet. Funny, it seems, that by keeping its dreams, it learned how to breathe fresh air. Long live the rose that grew from concrete when no one else even cared. And although that poem is quite touching, we know that resilience is really achieved through individual power on its own. It's most often achieved in community. And that's why we are celebrating just such amazing organizations that are with us tonight. Somos Mayfair works with families in our Mayfair community to lift them up. Our Youth Law Center works with some of our most vulnerable children to empower them. And we just appreciate so much the work that you do, and we appreciate the work of our other grantees very much as well. In addition to individual resilience, resilience is becoming increasingly important for nonprofit organizations as well. And there was a recent report that just came out in the last few days from the Nonprofit Finance Fund, and I thought that was interesting to just give you a couple of these statistics. One of the things that they identified was that nonprofits are facing a higher demand for their services than they've ever faced before. It's becoming harder to reach many of the people who need the help, but they're now afraid to ask for it. And yet they're meeting these challenges with resilience and creativity. They're adding staff, raising pay, expanding programs, increasing focus on advocacy, racial inequity, and the diversity of their leaders and staffs. And I just wanted to mention that is why our work at Sv2 is so important. Because we're providing that unrestricted funding and that beyond the dollar support, they're enabling those organizations to be resilient in these really challenging times. And since Sv2 has started, we've actually, 20 years ago in that space of time, have actually provided support to over 90 organizations. Tonight, there's many people with us that are either current or former grantees, and I'd like to ask those that are here tonight that are from those organizations to stand so we can appreciate you. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. That just really adds to our celebration. And this past year, I just want to recap very quickly because we've had another full year of grant making and impact investing. We've had 5 new grantees and 2 impact investees so far, and we're giving away over $500,000 this year. So in our Resilient Youth Lightning Grant Round, we awarded grants to California Youth Connection as well as Youth Law Center. We had a first ever Tech Lightning Grant Round, and 1 degree was the recipient, and they are reinventing the way the Bay Area residents are getting access to needed services, so very inspiring grantee. Our Pathways to Opportunity Grant Round is shortly going to be awarding to 2 organizations in the area of education, workforce development, social entrepreneurship. And in addition, we've had a great Kids and Teens program this year. I had the opportunity to be at our teen celebration a week and a half ago, and I was inspired by this next generation of philanthropists. They picked resilient youth as their topic as well, and they actually presented the awards to the 33 grantees that they gave, and those grantees, in addition to Youth Law Center, they also got the grantee from the kids, is Hack the Hood and Youth Alive. One of the other areas I want to highlight is impact investing, because as we all know, Sv2 was a leader in understanding how impact investing can really expand philanthropic impact. And this is our 3rd year of making impact investments, and 2 of our recipients so far this year are Village Enterprise and Accountable. In addition to the grant making and impact investing, we have had a very robust learning year, and some of the examples, including the learning we've been doing around poverty and equity issues in the Bay Area, the art of assessing nonprofits, a series of workshops this spring entitled Advocacy is Everywhere, where I think we all learned how to use advocacy as part of being philanthropists. And I also just want to acknowledge we've had some really wonderful partner events this year. We have our very first ever Sv2 Social Impact Book Club. We have partner organized interest circles in the areas of both family, philanthropy, and impact investing. We've had deep dive workshops and learning sessions that were all partner organized on top of our regular programming. So really just a great expansion. So that's just a very brief recap, and I want to just mention though that as we look forward, I'm even more excited because we have so much momentum right now. And the momentum comes in a couple of different flavors. First of all, we have had more partners join Sv2 this year than any time in our history. And I love that because that means we're just engaging more givers into our community. Also, in addition to that, we have the highest level of engagement we've ever had. If you look at our learning programs, our grant making, all of our events, we have the highest participation levels we've ever had at Sv2. And what that tells me is there's just a real appetite in our area for people to be more strategic in their giving. And I also think right now people are more activated than ever before. They want to be involved in issues that matter. And Sv2 provides a community that allows people to be able to do that in a more thoughtful and strategic way. I just really believe it's a special place to be part of this learning community. I think there's a tremendous opportunity to further expand our role. The Giving Code report that many of you have read has shown the need to connect resources with needs in our valley. And we really plan next year to strengthen all of our programming and our learning in a way in which really supports all of you as you take the next step in your philanthropic journey. So when I consider the current environment, the turbulent times we live in, to me, this has never been a more important time to be engaged and strategic in our giving. And so I want to thank you all for being part of our Sv2 community. And with that, let me turn it over now to Nancy Heinen to present this year's Laura Arriaga Andreessen Social Impact Award.
So it's now my great pleasure to present the 2018 Laura Arriaga Andreessen Social Impact Award. This award is named after Sv2's founder, Laura Arriaga Andreessen, and each year is presented to a person who has gone above and beyond in service to the Sv2 community. A list of past awardees is included in your program. This year's awardee came to Sv2 in December 2012 after a distinguished career in management consulting and at Cisco. He told me at the time that he planned to spend half his time with nonprofits and half his time with for-profit organizations. A couple months later, he joined the board of Sv2. And about a month after that, we launched an extremely comprehensive strategic planning process that has laid the groundwork for the work that Sv2 does today. Tonight's awardee, still relatively new to Sv2, volunteered to co-chair the strategic planning process with me and our ED Jen Rattay. He brought not only his deep expertise in strategic planning to the process, but also a remarkable understanding of the core values and community spirit that make Sv2 unique. We would not be as clear on our mission or aligned on our programming if we had not had our wonderful guidance from this year's awardee, Bill Brownell.
I want more. Sit down.
Because that's only part of the story. Because, you know, he's only doing this part-time. So when our grantees needed strategic guidance, and some of you are in the audience, Bill was there with Beyond the Dollar support. When we sought a vice chair in 2014 and then a board chair in 2015, Bill raised his hand and was unanimously elected to both positions. Bill has always brought his best game and his best heart to our endeavors. Oh, and did I mention that we were competing with Meg Whitman, the CEO of HP, for part of this time as Bill was working to help her devise the separation of HP into HP Inc. and HP Enterprise. Like, what part of part-time work does Bill not get? More recently, Bill led the search for Sv2's new CEO, shepherded Sv2 through its strategic plan refresh, serves on the executive committee, is active in grant rounds, and as part of the Impact Investing Working Group. Bill serves on other boards, trains for triathlons, hikes and bikes in the Bay Area and distant lands, and enjoys time with his wife Kimberly and his daughters. Plus, a fun fact, Bill grew up in Hawaii and he relishes his surfing trips to the island. It has been a particular joy for me to see Bill's dedication to community engagement increase exponentially as he has strategically and skillfully led Sv2 to become a more collaborative and effective organization for positive change in Silicon Valley. The entire Sv2 community is grateful for Bill's leadership and his enormous impact on Sv2, our partners, and our grantees. And now, please join me in congratulating Bill on his award.
Okay, well, thank you, Nancy, for those kind words, and really honored and appreciative of receiving this award. And it's really appropriate that I'm getting this, introduced in this award from Nancy, and as I understand it, the original nomination came from Kelly Pope, because both Nancy and Kelly Pope have been very instrumental on my Sv2 journey. Kelly Pope was the one who introduced me to SV2. I remember having coffee with her in the fall of 2012, I think at Coupa Cafe, one of my go-to places in Palo Alto. And then she said, why don't you go to the Christmas party? So I went to the Christmas party, I think at Lynn Christensen's house, and there were just such great people there doing such interesting and good work in the community. I thought, I've just got to join this group. And so my rendition of the history since then was a little different than Nancy's. I think she kind of pulled me into this strategic planning task force, and she kind of coaxed me a little on joining the board, but I did it, and it's been a great journey since then. By the way, as an aside to Nancy, I was wondering how the executive committee approved this award without me knowing about it, since I'm on the executive committee. But you know, I'll leave that to whatever happened there. The name of this award means a lot to me. One of the benefits of being the chair at SV2 is I've had a chance to get to know our founder, Laura Arriaga Andreessen, quite well, and she's really taught me a lot about the sector and about effective philanthropy, and has been a really great source of advice and inspiration around SV2 issues and where we're going. So I really appreciate her. And as I've thought about her, she was really a true social entrepreneur. She came up with this idea of SV2 20 years ago when there wasn't a group like this. And basically the idea was to combine some of the ideas from venture capital and adjust them and bring them into the social sector, but also do it on kind of a community basis, so that the group would roll up their sleeves and try to find really innovative nonprofits and then work with them, fund them, help them to scale, but stay involved. So what this became over the years since then is a global movement around engaged philanthropy. So she really started this movement. And in the years since then with SV2, we've had a great many partnerships with different grantees, many of whom have gone on to do great things and have great impact. And I think also along the way, we've learned a few things and evolved the model. So we've learned that often a community-wide approach is needed to solve an actual problem in addition to funding individual nonprofits. So we've spent a bit more time on system issues and on community issues. I think we've also learned that we can bring new kinds of capital into the sector. In addition to our own partner donations, we've tapped foundations quite a bit, and also now recently, as Nancy mentioned, or as Linda mentioned, we've brought in a lot of impact investing capital, which I think personally has a big chance to be a step change in the whole sector if it plays out the way it might. The other thing I think we've learned along the way is being effective at what SV2 does requires both kind of a strong mind and a deep heart, that you've got to have a no-nonsense view about what a solution might be or what a grantee potential might be, but also a deep heart to be empathetic about what's really happening on the ground and connect with the community that you're trying to support. So I think those have been good learnings. I was at a conference recently in Chicago with a few other SV2 partners that was a bringing together of this global movement of different groups around the world that are doing engaged philanthropy. And the speaker there, who's the board chair of this SVP international group, was asking the audience two questions. Her questions were, why do you show up? Why do you show up for this kind of community and philanthropic work? And then the other was, what sustains you over time in continuing to do this through the ups and downs? And I thought those were good questions and something that maybe all of you might want to reflect on. My own reflection for me was, why do I show up for this part-time, or may stretch the term, part-time role, is that I find that I feel that I can really make a difference here, and feel fortunate that I have both kind of the time and resources and skills, but also that I can do it by joining forces with others, which is really the SV2 model, that you can magnify your impact by joining with others. So that's kind of what is the main reason I show up, is to make a difference. And by the way, in my household, as an aside, so I'm kind of the lead on engaged in philanthropy and impact investing. My wife Kimberly, who's here, is kind of our lead on the equally important but more difficult area of advocacy and politics. So between the two of us, we cover a lot of ground, I think. I think in the philanthropic work, it's really a unique opportunity to do this in Silicon Valley because we are this incredible economic region that's having an outsized impact on the whole world. And as a result of that, we have we have a richness of resources. We have a lot of very talented people. And I think what that should give us, at least, is a shot at being able to solve the key problems in our own backyard and hopefully influence the solutions on broader national or global problems if we do things right. So I think there's a big opportunity for all of us in that. On the broader impact that we might have, one of the things I noticed at this Chicago conference, and some of you were there, is that these other groups around the world do look to SV2 as kind of a beacon of innovation and a guide about what they might do. So I think we can have an influence more broadly through that kind of network. On the second question that this speaker at this conference asked about, well, what sustains you? My answer to that is really all of you. As I thought about it, it's really this amazing community that we have of wonderful partners, inspiring grantees, our amazing staff, and all that comes together in kind of a unique culture as well that's, I think, really attractive, at least for me. It helps to sustain me. And so as was mentioned, I spent a lot of my growing up years in Hawaii. So I kind of have a Hawaiian take on the SV2 culture, which is, I think the SV2 culture has a lot of aloha spirit in it, which is really kind of a combination of kindness, empathy, generosity, and collaborative kind of ways of doing things, which I think is really powerful. And it's almost some ohana, as they would say, some family kind of connotation to it or feel to it. So to me, that sustains me. And the other thing that sustains me is all the new people that are joining the partnership. And just I marvel at some of them in terms of their experience and skills and the energy they're bringing. And as Linda mentioned, really the SV2 group is growing significantly, and there's a lot of momentum behind the group. So I would say thank you to all of you for helping to sustain me. And then thank you for this award. And also go Warriors. So.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Jody Chiang. I serve as SV2's Director of Grant Making, and before I go on, I just want to say, go Bill. We're so grateful for you, for just your investment of time, energy, and considerable talent. Thank you very much. Tonight, it feels really particularly meaningful to be gathered as a community. As we've discussed, our times are uncertain, policies are changing all the time, and inequality is growing. And these realities are very much on our minds and our hearts. And they serve as the backdrop for what we do here at SV2. And that is why we are so honored to have the opportunity to listen to and learn from our grantees. These are the people on the ground every day doing the real work to meet real needs in the community and change systems. So tonight we have a special format to get to do that. Our format is 2 fireside chats. There's no actual fire, but just imagine it. We're honored to have the opportunity to listen in on 2 special conversations. Each chat will feature 2 leaders from an SV2 grantee. First from Youth Law Center, and second from Somos Mayfair. And these leaders will talk together about how their work is being shaped in this particular environment and time, and how funders can most effectively be aware of and supporting their work. In the first conversation, we'll hear from Jennifer Rodriguez, Executive Director of Youth Law Center, and Janae Eustace, a Quality Parenting Initiative Consultant with YLC. YLC is one of our newest grantees. As you heard, they were the winner of the November Resilient Youth Lightning Grant Round, and also just in late-breaking news, selected as an SV2 Teens grantee this very month. They are a public interest law firm that works to ensure that the legal rights of children in the nation's foster care and justice system are protected, and that system-involved youth receive the services and support they need to become healthy and productive adults. It is my honor to introduce and welcome to the stage Jennifer Rodriguez and Janae Eustace. Welcome.
Hi, Jennifer. This is a great night, it's a great day, and I just would like to have a conversation with you. So, what is the change Youth Law Center is hoping to achieve in the world, and how do we work on that?
So, the mission of the Youth Law Center's work is really to transform systems so that young people who are in the foster care and juvenile justice systems can thrive. And having grown up in those systems and spent most of my childhood in both facilities that actually had bars in juvenile hall and across the Bay Area, and facilities that didn't have bars but certainly felt like prisons, I can say that I think the core of our work is really transformation to systems that celebrate young people's worth and humanity. You know, when people hear about young people, children, and young adults who are in the foster care and juvenile justice system, I think what they often hear is sort of a laundry list of statistics around, you know, the less than half that graduate from high school, the 3% that graduate from college, the majority, the fact that they're the #2 population who are homeless, both here in the Bay Area and across California and the country. And so people fixate on those as sort of the most pressing issues, but really, from our perspective, the most pressing issues for young people is the fact that our systems treat them as if they are not human beings. We know more in this moment, right now, May 2018, than I think we've ever known about how to cultivate resilience for young people. We know exactly how brain development works. We know that resiliency, for a long time I think people thought resiliency was something you either had or you didn't have, that you were born with it, you were more resilient or you were less resilient. We know now literally you can grow resiliency through relationships, through love, through connection, through family and parenting. But we're working in two systems, the juvenile justice system and the foster care system, that for nearly 100 years have actually done everything but acknowledge the power of relationships and love and worthiness, and who have literally, for the most part, thought about institutionalizing children, right? In the foster care system, our entire system started with orphanages and houses of refuge, and the juvenile justice system, our work at the Youth Law Center actually started with getting children out of adult jails and out of reform schools and back into community. So we know we have this huge task on system transformation, because we have systems that literally depress youth's resiliency. So I think that is the core of our work. And at this moment in time here in the Bay Area, you know, the fault lines for every single social issue, racism, poverty, social inequality, joblessness, substance abuse, mental illness, our children who are in these systems, they are the ones who show us how we are failing as a community. Every single young person who is involved with our systems is here because those safety nets in those systems follow. I sort of think of our children as canary in the coal mine for the overall health of our community. So at the Youth Law Center, like I said, we started as a legal advocacy organization, and we really started our work with trying to prevent harm. But now I would say our work is actually the majority trying to rebuild systems. And I so appreciated Bill's comments earlier about leadership and innovation and growth, because that is now one of our #1 strategies, is trying to actually work with folks who are leaders in systems and apply everything we know from every other field, behavioral economics, from child and youth development, from sort of business efficiency and how to be effectively manage an organization to try to benefit our young people.
Oh, thank you.
And of course, another one of our strategies is to really align our advocacy around what young people who are in the foster care and juvenile justice system have experienced. Can you talk a little bit about the role that youth voice and engagement and empowerment and resilience plays in our advocacy?
Yes, for sure. I mean, the theme of tonight, hearing resilience and community resonates so much from my own personal path and story. Like you know, I was in the foster care system and aged out of that system, starting in San Jose, which we have some awardees here tonight, and that's awesome, but starting there all the way up to Sacramento. And just being a part of that system, you're able to really know what it feels like to be disempowered. You know how it feels like to have every single point and piece of your life planned out by someone else other than yourself. You know what it feels like to not be a decision maker. You know what it feels like to not have love and community. So for me, all of that really changed with another one of the grantees here tonight, which is the California Youth Connection, and really empowered me to find my voice and to know what it means to truly have youth engagement and to be a part of the alignment with decision makers. And one thing that Youth Law Center continues to do is it continues to provide youth and young adults with empowerment, that they know that their voice is the number one and most important at the table, that always bringing it back to whatever goals and missions that you know maybe working on as an organization, that it's real, because it's exactly what the youth are feeling and experiencing is their day-to-day life. Something that Youth Law Center does very well is make sure that everyone and all of the goals and projects that we work on are centered around what the needs are, what the true needs are, what's really out there, what our youth need, what our families need, and what our communities need. Because we know that it doesn't just start with one person. We know that it does take more than that. There is a community that these families go to after experiencing the juvenile justice and child welfare systems. They're not just in a bubble and go off and life is great after those experiences. There's still needs. And so really what that looks like is having the empowerment, having a youth engagement structure. That's something that Youth Law Center does really well with.
And I think we're so proud of our ties to youth engagement. My first exposure to the Youth Law Center was actually as a youth member of the California Youth Connection, and so this was sort of my first taste of power, and the Youth Law Center incubated the California Youth Connection. We actually, when I was a youth member, the Youth Law Center provided office space to the California Youth Connection. So I remember being a teenager and being in the offices and watching these lawyers who were fierce and unafraid and had big visions and held systems accountable for policy change, and thinking, when I grow up, I want to be just like them. And now here I am. All grown up. But I think that model of really being centered on cultivating youth empowerment and youth leadership and modeling the way. I went to law school because another former CYC member and former Youth Law Center employee and attorney and then board member, because she was my role model. And I didn't know anybody who had been in foster care or juvenile justice, who had ever gone to law school, who had ever been a lawyer, but I got to see her do it. And so that paved the way for me. So I do think that's something that is special at the roots of our approach to system change. And it's really easy for advocacy groups who work on systemic change and policy change to get away, right? Like to be sitting in an office because you don't have proximity, you're not providing services in the community, to forget about what the things are that are actually important to young people. But the Youth Law Center, we always have proximity because of our relationship with young people, and I know that's something that I'm really proud of.
Yeah, and Jennifer talks about her role model, and something we shared with the Sv2 teens that was really special to me is that she was a role model for all of us. So when I was a young member of CYC, I got to look up to Jennifer and her leadership and see who she was and what she was doing and really what she was about, and making those engagement and connections, and that really sparked that fire in me to want to be better. So to be a child in the foster care system that's powerless, and not ever seeing anyone besides my teachers who'd gone to college, to see that a person who'd gone through the foster care system was like she was in law school back then, and she was in law school and she was leading a lot of the policy and legislative work of CYC, California Youth Connection, and that really just sparked all of us. We all want to be Jennifer when we grow up. So it's wonderful to be able to work side by side with her now.
I told them all, have better goals than that, bigger and better goals.
Thank you. So, what is one thing you want someone to know about what's going on in today's climate about Youth Law Center?
These are really hard times. Hard here in the Bay Area to be a nonprofit organization that has big, radical dreams. Not just for incremental change, but really for abolitionist change, right? For our young people to be free. And to have a vision that doesn't involve sort of making small changes, but dismantling the whole thing and building anew. You know, despite the fact that there are so many resources in this community, and this is really, I mean, it's the home in the country of innovation. There is still a tendency, I think, with funders to want, and I apologize for anyone, but you're technically listening to our fireside conversation, but there's a tendency, I think, to want to do bean counting. Like, how many people did you serve? How many units did you provide? You know, how can you quantify? And we're going on a marathon. It's not a sprint. I think our advocacy work around system transformation, I mean, anybody who knows what it takes to change a narrative, to do a culture change, to literally change and dismantle 100 years of doing things one way, and try to build a system that fosters resiliency and prizes resiliency over public safety or physical safety, knows that is a long-term goal. And so it's hard to get investments. And I think what you said about leadership is really, really important, because I think what I wish funders knew is that if you believe in the leader, and you believe in their capability to lead, and you believe in their vision, then you have to invest. And sort of trust in the wisdom, trust in the passion, trust in, you know, the ideas and the spirit, that we will figure out how to get the work done. And we may ask for your guidance in that work, but it is frustrating, and we, for the most part, have resisted the pressure to sort of go this direction. I mean, particularly in the political environment, can't tell you how many phone calls I got from funders who said, you know, the whole world has basically changed. How are you going to respond? And I said, for our children, things were bad prior to the election. They continue to be challenging. We're staying the course. We're working on exactly the same things that we were working on prior to. We're working on making sure that every young person who's in the justice system has the opportunity back in community to get a higher education, to go to college, to be the adult they were meant to be. Working on trying to make sure that every single young person in the foster care system is living in family and community. That was important then, even more important now. Even more important now to give our young people a buffer. So we're not going to respond, we're going to stay the course. We lost a lot of funding opportunity. I'm not, and it's, as an ED, it's not funny. And I think the other thing that, you know, it's important to know is that, you know, as an organization that advocates for who I feel like are the most forgotten and most vulnerable children in all of our communities, we don't even know that they exist a lot of times. Children who are in foster care and who are incarcerated, and even though they're right here in our neighborhoods. I feel a special obligation to be a very careful steward of resources and money. And that means that the resources that we have, we don't spend them on fancy marketing or communications or folks to design a great website or put together marketing materials that sing all our virtues and our accomplishments. And in some ways that doesn't even feel comfortable when our youth are still living in such despair. So, you know, it's hard. I wish, again, that folks could see the value of our work and be willing to invest and be focused on our results, because we can explain our results, but we might not put them on a pretty piece of paper. So those are the things that I really wish folks understood about the work that we're trying to do.
Yeah, thank you.
So Janae, this is all about resilience and hope. So tell me, what gives you hope that we can achieve the impact that we're working towards?
Wow, hope. What gives me hope is being able to have the spaces that Youth Law Center has really created for youth, created for youth who are in foster care and the juvenile justice system. I mean, to have that space and be able to be at the table and know that your voice is valued and that people are listening. Because we know that to listen is one thing, but to really listen to youth who just feel like powerless, no voice, and you're youth. And a lot of times that just makes you dismissible in itself. But all of that changed, working for Youth Law Center, working with youth to do that myself now, to empower our youth in our communities and our different sites across, nationally, honestly. And the time has changed. We're in a different time now. We're in a time where being a youth and a young person really means power. I mean, we've seen on the news, we've seen nationally what youth can be, who youth are, and we know that, and we've known that for a long time because we've always gone to youth and listened. We've always been there to advocate for them. So what gives me hope is that we continue to have investment, that we continue to have investors that really believe in our leadership, that believe in what we're doing, and that are able to be there regardless of the political climate, but just be there and to invest in our future and invest in our youth, because we see this every day. We see youth that are labeled with 100 different things grow up to be so successful and really just people who they should be, who they deserve to be. So that's my hope. My hope is that we continue to have investment, we continue to spread youth engagement and youth voice.
And I agree with that. I think we're in a time that actually people are willing to really bank on the power of what's possible and not just what's probable, and sort of vision something entirely different. And I think what makes me hopeful actually is being in spaces like this, where there is really an effort to, just to be real, the world outside is very ugly. And there is a lot of, every time you turn on the TV or go on social media, it's ugliness and hate and people arguing. Even people that would otherwise be friends are arguing. And I think in spaces like this, building the community and in our work, being able to bring together the people who have the most to lose, right? The young people, the families, birth families, the resource families, the folks who are on the ground in the community, and having them together vision and build and be part of the solution in system transformation, that's hopeful. And that's beautiful, and it's powerful, and it's what gives, I think, us, both the hope and also, just the motivation and the ideas to be able to win. People that have the most to lose, it's an investment so that they'll win. Wow, thank you.
Next, we have the wonderful opportunity to hear from Somos Mayfair. Somos Mayfair is a grassroots community organization fostering the well-being of families through social services, cultural activism, and community organizing in the Mayfair neighborhood of East San Jose. And tonight we're especially grateful to hear from and celebrate Somos because they are in their third and final grant year with Sv2, and it's been a wonderful relationship. It is my great pleasure to introduce and welcome Camille Yanes Fontanilla, Executive Director, and her colleague Jessica Pastadillos, Director of Resource Development. Come on up, ladies.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Camille Yanes Fontanilla, and it's been my incredible honor to be the Executive Director for Somos Mayfair for 5 years now. I've been on staff for 8 years, and it's been an incredible ride, and this is a bittersweet moment as we are nearing the end of our 3-year grant with Sv2. So there are some emotions running pretty high because it's been a lot happening in the last 3 years, and we've probably changed completely as an organization since 3 years ago. And so I just want to thank the Sv2 team and all of the members, especially our lead partners, Cope Lau and Mark Wilson, who've stood with us in these 3 years to really kind of help us become the organization that we are today.
My name is Jessica Pasadillos, and I am the Director of Resource Development for Somos Mayfair. I've been with the organization for 3.5 years, and I'm excited. The work that we're doing is exciting.
Yeah. So a little bit different in our Fireside Chat is we're going to talk a little bit more about funding and philanthropy and where we see things kind of going, but I think it is important to provide you all with a little bit of context on who we are and what we do. We are a 21-year-old organization. We are based in the Mayfair neighborhood of East San Jose, and if you haven't come out to visit us, you will know that our neighborhood beats at the heartbeat and drumbeat of community organizing at its core. Everything about our neighborhood is centered on community organizing. Cesar Chavez's family home is in our neighborhood, and we have a long legacy of organizing. There have been organizations before us and ones that will come after us because of the resilience and the ownership of change that radiates from that community. And so that is the story we go out and tell often, is one of resiliency and community taking action and ownership and being the true agents of change. Because quite frankly, if you Google us or you Google our neighborhood, a lot of things will come up about failure and statistics and everything we've gotten wrong in terms of the nonprofits that are in our community. And so a lot of our work is to actually challenge that narrative and really talk about what truly happens in our community. And so our work, 21 years now, is really centered in that neighborhood. It's 60 square blocks, about 20,000 residents at the heart of Silicon Valley. And we know there's huge disparities between the people who live in our community and the people who benefit from the people who live in our community. And our mission is really centered on supporting children, organizing families, and connecting neighbors so that we can together have power with and address systemic inequities that we see that confront Silicon Valley. And we really do that by uplifting the dreams, the power, and the leadership of our community. So with that said, we are going to have this conversation, and we hope it's just as real and as raw as the last one we heard.
So Camille, you've dedicated 8 years to Somos. What's your personal connection to the work, your why?
Yeah, so I was born and raised in East San Jose. I walked the Mayfair streets all my life, and there's different things I think that brought me to Somos, but really I think some of the most compelling points of it is my grandfather organized in the neighborhood himself. Like I said, there's a history of organizing in our neighborhood, and he worked on senior issues, made sure that Filipino seniors who served in World War II and weren't getting services were seen, and he set that example for me. And then on top of that, I grew up in East Side, and a lot of the narrative that I talked about was, go to school, get your grades, and get out as fast as you possibly can. And that essentially set me on this trajectory to go off to college and really think about leading my community. But simultaneously, my cousin, who also grew up in Mayfair, had a different path. And it was through his journey where I really saw the intersection between school failure, the lack of health care, and for him, what ultimately led to his detention and potential deportation by ICE. And I, took a hiatus from my job at the time to work on his case, specifically to make sure he wouldn't be deported. And in that process, I realized there's hundreds of people in Mayfair who don't have access to lawyers, who don't have access to the language and translation capacity to be able to navigate those systems. And so that's really what made me join the Somos team. So Jessica, you've been on our team for about 4 years now, and you have a background in fund development, but you are an ideal candidate for us for lots of different reasons. So I'd love for you to share a little bit about what attracted you to our team.
Sure. So I grew up in East Oakland. I was raised by a single mother who came to this country from El Salvador. I have a twin sister and a younger brother. We were very fortunate to have programs and people who invested in our family to break the cycle of poverty. So my sister is a vice principal at Castro Valley High School. My brother is a branch manager for City Bank in Los Altos, and I am a director with Somos Mayfair.
to come from Oakland, right, to have experienced homelessness, that is very rare. Usually one makes it, not all three. And because of that, our family, was able to break the cycle of poverty. My mother, we bought our house, we paid her bills. Because she was a blue-collar worker, it's not like she has a retirement fund. We are her retirement fund. And we were able to do that because people invested in our work, and invested in us. So why Somos? So I tell the story. I remember in my interview, I told Camille, the reason I got excited about the organization, I had heard about Somos 2 years before I actually applied for the organization. I was relocating from Nevada. I spent 3 years in Nevada, you guys. But and so Somos came up, my mentor was like, I know your personality, this is a grassroots organization, you would be an amazing fit. And so I did research and I pulled up an annual report, and this is public, right? And they're making the case to give a raise to one of their line staff. It was a significant raise. The executive director was not getting a raise. And I was like, when have I ever seen a nonprofit publish their reasoning behind a raise? Now for someone like me, right, a woman of color in the nonprofit sector, to persist in the sector is a challenge. To have experienced poverty, to want to work in the sector, things that have come up, right, that I think are challenges. The first one is pay, right? So if I'm going to break the cycle of poverty for my family and I want to work in the nonprofit sector, but you're not paying me a livable wage, that's hard. The second one is culture, right? So now I'm working for a nonprofit that wants to do good. And their strategy doesn't sit well with me, right? Having been someone who experienced these issues, I was like, that's not culturally sensitive. And when you speak up about it, right, all of a sudden, right, you're the agitator. What do you mean? This is our culture. You're not fit. And I think the third reason why it's difficult to persist is privilege, right? When we look at executive directors in the public sector, most of them are white, they're affluent, and we tend to hire what we know, right? And so to be in the sector is difficult. Somos is the opposite of that. When I looked at this, the organization who was leading it, I was like 83% of the leadership team is women of color. 100% of the line staff are people of color. Somos pays a living wage. What the executive director makes and what the director team makes, it's a 10, 15K difference, you guys. We're not talking 50K, 70K, right? Which in the nonprofit sector is a thing, and I think it's important for people to look at that when you're talking about equity. And so, for me, the organization, the values, I can raise money for Somos, which is why I ended up on the team.
You're doing a good job, by the way.
You're doing a good job. So Camille, we are talking about equity. Given that, can you share with us the current challenges our community is facing?
Yeah, I think we have a lot going on, and I sometimes, or more recently, have been explaining it to folks as I feel like we're in a pressure cooker, right? But for our community, it's always felt like this. We're a neighborhood that dates back 100 years. We have always been the home in Silicon Valley to working poor, primarily immigrants, who either contributed to the Valley of Heart's Delight and made sure that our orchards and our canneries were humming. And now I believe that the people who live in Mayfair and broader East San Jose or communities like ours are really driving the tech sector. They're the people who are our janitors, they're in our kitchens and cooking for all of us, they're our childcare providers so we can all go to work. And it's these kinds of issues and these kinds of systems rooted in poverty and racism that have been confronting our neighborhood for 100 years. And so when I think about this pressure cooker that we're in now, it's kind of like we've always felt these things. It's just more clear who are our allies and who are our targets when we're thinking about organizing and advocacy work. And so I think you guys hit it right on the head in the last Fireside Chat. Like really, it's about staying focused and really getting back down to like who are we and what are our values, what do we stand for both in community but in the organization. And I would say that some of the biggest issues we're confronting right now are, the income inequality that we are seeing. People who fill out our intake forms in our community say that they make between $5,000 and $15,000 a year. And that's compared to the average in Santa Clara County of $108,000 a year. Rent in our neighborhood is $800 to $1,500. Some of our Sv2 partners came to some of our on-the-table discussions, and they heard from people in our community who said they paid $1,500 to live in a rat-infested garage. And that's a win for them, because if not, they would be on the streets. We also know that development is happening kind of all across San Jose, but also primarily in East San Jose too. We're getting transportation networks, we're getting things that we've always championed and wanted in our community. But quite frankly, we're also afraid, who is this development for? Is it for us? Because it's been 100 years, we've never done this before, So what is happening in our community, and when all this progress is said and done, will we still be here? So these are the kinds of challenges and the questions that I think keep our team up at night, and what we're trying to be nimble enough to address.
Right. So how are we addressing that?
Yeah, I think at our core, really knowing who we are and what our organizing model is, and it's 100% centered on community voice and community leadership, right? So having our department that is entirely focused on training community residents themselves to be the agents of change. We, 6 years ago said that that's going to be who we are. I think we are at that place where we're feeling really good. Like, we do that, and we do it really well, and we can share with other communities how we've done it, and hopefully under-resourced communities can also figure out their pathway forward. It's not about someone else telling them how to do it, but it's about how do we share our tools and support so that we can lift lots of communities up together. I think we're also being nimble in making sure that we are following community's voice and lead in the kinds of issues we're attacking. We are in the middle of an education campaign because our parents 8 years ago said, our kids aren't entering school ready to learn, and they're not reading by 3rd grade, and we have a school system that is failing our kids. And so, we really doubled down both on services and programs that are solutions to that. But if you've read the Mercury News in the last year, you'll know that we are working really hard on school reform, and we had to push and organize. And so sometimes for us, organizing means, 15 moms working on their leadership development time over time, or it means 300 people doing a walkout for their education. And so we do all of that, and it's always centered on community voice. So I think as we think about the challenges and how we remain nimble enough to follow communities' lead to address these issues, from your perspective as our fund development director, what do you think has allowed us to be effective to do that?
Sure. So one of the things that has really helped so I've been with the organization and I've seen us grow, right? We've doubled our budget, is when funders trust us, right? Partnership. And they give us general operating funds, and they give us space to fail. We're not going to get it right? I mean, we want to get it right. We're going to try to get it right. But in order for us to be innovative, in order for us, to try solutions to really create transformational change, we need funders who are going to give us the space to dedicate the resources where we, to fund my salary, right? Who wants to fund development? But it's needed, right? Our Director of Operations and Finance. We need to make sure that our numbers are good. And to also be able to innovate. One of the programs that we receive funding for is Somos Fuertes. It's our network of promotores. And the reason why we were able to launch that program is because we had a funder who said, here is money. It's okay to fail. And so we were able to take that and run with it. Camille, can you think of another funder?
Yeah, I think the Sv2 Foundation, like Sv2, also gives us general operating support, and so they give us the flexibility to be nimble as well. But I think the other thing that they've done, which I thought was huge in the philanthropic sector, was challenging themselves and challenging their board to make their first community organizing grant. And it came to Somos, Californians for Justice, and people acting in community together, right? And they were having a really hard time kind of articulating to their board why this mattered originally. But I think when like you said, when they trust the organizations, when they wanted to meet the needs and challenges of Silicon Valley, they knew we needed to start thinking about solutions, not necessarily only from a service delivery way, but how do we kind of, change these systems, dismantle them, turn them on their heads. And the only way to do that is to start funding community organizing, which is scary for some folks, right? And so rather than making it part of our general operating portfolio with them, they said, we're going to give you a specific grant to work on local control funding formula organizing in your schools and base build and support, parents and youth to find their voice so that they can advocate for themselves. Because we, as a philanthropic funder, can give you, grants here and there, but your school district is getting $13 million. And how do your parents know how to navigate that $13 million and make sure that they are serving their kids, which is the only reason why that school district is drawing down that kind of money, right? And so it was a pilot. It was like, let's see how this goes, and and then the trust factor, right? When school reform issues and potential, fraud and misuse of funds in our community was starting to hit the narrative, I called our program officer and was like, we're still working on local control funding formula. That's not going anywhere. But now we want to look at these bond sales. Parents want to look at the $30 million that have been dedicated to our facilities. So how do we start to go after that? And they were like, as long as you're still supporting the leadership development of residents and base building, you're golden. Right, and so I feel like that's the kind of trust and partnership that's really conducive to philanthropy. And I would shout out also, I said it in the beginning, but Sv2 has been that partner with us as well. Our thought leaders, again, Coke and Mark, have stood with us to develop and re-engineer some of our programming so we can make sure people of color, immigrants East San Jose, can get a living wage. And we wouldn't have gotten there without some of that thinking from them as well. Awesome. So just with that said, I know that we're coming up to an end right now, so as philanthropy is changing, what do you hope that, people remember about our Fireside Chat?
Sure. So I am going to talk about bringing it back to general operating funds. And so Camille and I recently attended a conference on general operating funds and the importance of, funders being able to be nimble with organizations and take risks. One of the speakers made the comment, if we think about the civil rights movement and if we think about the youth organizers and the organizations that were at the forefront of change, right? This is why we are who we are, right? This is America because of the struggle and because of the fight that they fought it, right? Would they have met the due diligence of our funders today? No. And so think about that though, right? I mean, when we think about the civil rights movement, they were a catalyst, right? And so if we are talking about transformational change, our challenge to you is to be nimble, to be flexible, to allow for failure, and to look at the organizations that you're funding through an equity lens, right? Who is making up the leadership team? How is pay? That's not in the 90s, you guys. That stuff is public. And so it's just, that's what we do you with.
Thank you to all of our grantees who are here tonight. We are so humbled and honored to be part of your work. Thank you. So now it's dessert time. So we hope that all of you will connect with our grantees, connect with each other, drink coffee and eat dessert, and enjoy the rest of the evening. Thank you so much for being here.